All right, and the next speaker and final speaker of the evening that we'll have is Terry Johnson, and he's a Marine Advisory Program agent with Alaska Sea Grant in Anchorage, and he's going to be talking about climate change and Alaska fisheries.
About a year ago, the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy offered me a little bit of money to do a report to the industry on the current state of knowledge and thinking about the effects that climate change on Alaska's commercial fisheries. Next. First of all, I'm not a scientist. I don't conduct original research. What I've done is extensive literature reviews and conversations with people, interviews with people who are doing work in this field. There's a tremendous amount of information generally categorized as climate change, ocean climate change, but not a whole lot that's really specific to how it's affecting our fisheries. So what this very short talk will be about, and this is a summary of a report that's just been published that you'll have an opportunity to pick up tomorrow, I hope. A little bit about what's known about the ocean climate, making a distinction between short-term and long-term trends, just a very few words about acidification, and some of the known or implied effects on important Alaska commercial fisheries, plus a couple of projections for the short, long-term, or short or mid-term, and a few thoughts about adaptation. Here's some points to keep in mind. These things you all know, but it's important to focus on these points when we're talking about these things. Weather is not climate. Transitory climate variations are not long-term climate change. And by that I mean things like regime shifts and El Nino. They may be influenced by climate change, but they are not climate change itself. And finally, even though they are not climate change, they may provide some previews for what might be coming if the long-term climate approximates what we have been seeing in the short term. Next slide. So, as we know, Alaska commercial fisheries are very valuable, almost $6 billion in economic activity, plus they contribute an important part of our recreation and tourism industry. Here's a few things that we know about the ocean climate. The main point is it's definitely warming. There's no question about that. Globally, it's warming just a small amount. In Alaska, it's warming a little faster. This 5-degree Fahrenheit anomaly in 2014 was exceeded in the past year, and I believe in this year even more so. It's not a consistent, the line is not consistent, but the trend is consistent, and indications are that it's going to continue and increase. Next slide. This is global climate temperature. The point here is you can see that the trend, in the last 140 years, whatever, 120 years, has been upward, significantly upward, but with a lot of annual and decadal scale variations. So the ocean is getting warmer, so what does that mean? Well, increased frequency and severity of storms, sea level rise, changes in current circulation patterns, both atmospheric and ocean currents and circulation patterns, changes to stream flows in the streams that feed into the ocean, and significantly, dramatically diminishing sea ice coverage. Being there in the oceans, you're right at the intersection between the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea, and your fisheries may be influenced by somewhat different factors, depending upon where they're located. But one thing that's for certain with regard to the Bering Sea is that sea ice coverage is very important. The timing of the melt, ice melt, and so on, because of the spring blooms of the ice, algae, and the whole plankton food chain that's based on it. When the ice melts, the algae bloom, and they support community of zooplankton and so on, and the effect is Another effect of warming is bringing in invasive species, including disease-causing microorganisms, disease-causing pathogens, fish, mollusks, crustaceans. We have not seen much in terms of permanent arrival of invasives, but we've seen lots of temporary arrivals based on annual temperature anomalies. When we get warmer water, we get more things like sharks and squids and mackerel. Not all of those changes are actually invasive. Some are indigenous species, like the melanaster jellyfish, which is a predator on many of the things in the food chain, and also the R2 flounder, which is a competitor and a predator. And those, when you have dramatic expansions in the numbers of organisms like that, it has a profound effect on the whole food web, including the commercial fisheries. This illustration pertains actually to the occurrence of harmful algal blooms with marine mammals. But as you can see, the point of it is that it was long thought by most people that harmful algal blooms, particularly like shellfish poisoning, was confined to the Gulf of Alaska and the warmer waters. But as you can see, they occur all the way up into the Arctic. So that's very little bit about what we know about what's changing in the ocean. Now, what's changing in the fisheries? Well, there's three factors that we're concerned with: the abundance, the distribution, and then behaviors such as, for example, as run timing. And we're looking for changes in the fisheries. So here's some assumptions that are not entirely supported by data so far, that warming waters will increase abundance of, increase productivity, which will result in abundance of commercial fish at high latitudes. And this appears to be proving true in some locations in the Atlantic. It's not so evident so far in Alaska. However, this assumption of increased abundance is balanced by the understanding that there will be declines in other species or other stocks resulting from changes in food supply or competition or predation and so on. Here's an example of a presumably climate-related change in abundance. This is a really interesting one. This relates to the 1976 regime shift. And as you can see, going into the 70s, the cold regime period, shrimp were extremely abundant, flatfish much less so, and cod and pollock much less so. And as we got into a warmer regime after the shift in 1976, shrimp virtually died out. Flatfish, cod and pollock became extremely abundant. Now, again, this is not long-term climate change, but this is a regime shift toward a warmer regime, and this may provide some indication of the effects of a long-term warming trend. With distribution, there has been documented poleward or northerly shift in the center of abundance of several species. Most of them fairly short distances, a few dozen miles. The statistical center of abundance has shifted northward. What we've not seen a whole lot of change of is groundfish, such as pollock, because it's assumed because of this large cold pool in the north-central Bering, the pollock don't like to cross over into that cold water and have not shifted their abundance up into the Chukchi or the northern Bering as they might have. However, salmon are showing up further north. couple of words about ocean acidification. I think you already heard some presentations. I'm not going to reiterate that. I just want to emphasize, in case you aren't quite fully tuned into this, the term acidification is a technical term in the field of chemistry, and it's used a little bit differently from the way laymen use it. The ocean is not acidic, not even close to acidic. It's never going to be acidic. What it is it's somewhat less alkaline than it has been in the past. And this has a number of implications, the most important of which is that there are lower levels of saturation of calcium carbonate in the water, and shell-forming organisms need that calcium carbonate. And of course, this has big implications for crabs, but it's also important to microorganisms or small planktons that are an important part of the food chain. So I'll leave it at that. You can talk to the OA experts for the clarification on those points. Yeah, I guess the midterm summary here is that so far, although we've seen lots of short-term climate phenomenon effects, we haven't seen a great deal of long-term climate effects in our waters. So a lot of the research in the field has been looking at those short-term effects, or has been looking at climate effects in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, where they have been feeling the effects more and have had some pretty dramatic responses down there, much more so. But modeling that's been done by scientists offers some hints or some projections about what may be coming to our waters based on those results. So here's a quick rundown of some of the most important commercial fisheries in Alaska. Pollock is our biggest, most valuable fishery. Their relationship to the sea ice is a fairly direct one. Although they get real high hatchet, they get large numbers of larvae during warm years. They get much lower survival during warm years than they do in cold years, in part because of the quality of the food that's available, in part because of the effects of predation. So biologists now are predicting a significant reduction in the availability of pollock over the next couple of decades. Halibut, very different situation. Their numbers have been historically low the last few years, attributable to slow growth, maybe related in part to fishing mortality, because the fishery maybe wasn't managed quite in an optimal way. It's also correlated with this huge increase in the arrow-toothed flounder, which you can see on the right there. That's a competitor with and a predator on juvenile halibut. Positive, warm Pacific decadal oscillations tend to drive favorable currents, and there are predictions for an improved halibut resource if warming trends continue. Crab, sad story with crab, things don't look good. Crab abundance responds to a complex set of factors, including things like sea level and atmospheric pressure and so on. It appears to be linked to the Aleutian low. Cool phase is better. Predation is a factor. And of course, ocean acidification is a major threat in the Bering Sea. People within NOAA have actually predicted that the king crab fishery is going to grind to a halt within this century. Salmon, very complicated story, so many stocks, complex life history. The one thing we do know is that the paleo record, the prehistoric record, shows major fluctuations that correlate pretty directly to previous climate fluctuations. The salmon are very responsive to climate change. So far, we haven't been able to pin down very many that are directly attributable to long-term climate change here in Alaska, but take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. Look at 1976, and all four of those stocks had significant increases immediately following that regime shift from a cool regime to a warm regime. So that implies that warmer water might be good for sockeye and pinks. So what could it mean for Alaska salmon? Well, here's some implications. Generally better conditions for pinks and chums, probably better for sockeye as long as they don't get, their out-migration doesn't get out of sync with their key plankton blooms. The picture is somewhat less rosy for Chinook and coho, although a lot of that has to do with stream conditions like they have experienced down in the States. And, you know, in our bigger and colder streams, the effect may not be so bad, but keep in mind, all across the state, we've seen dramatic decreases in Chinook in the last few years. And the fourth factor is colonization, which is being documented, colonization of some systems. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we know about the resource. Now, just a very few thoughts about adaptation. There's three categories of human responses to change. One is research and monitoring, and of course there's a great deal of that going on. The second is mitigation, and that mostly has to do with trying to reduce carbon emissions. And then the one that we're pretty much focused on here is adaptation, which means increasing resilience to change. So there's two approaches to that. The public sector approach, which is basically fishery management agencies. Both ADFG and NOAA have climate strategies. NOAA's is a climate research strategy, and ADFG is a climate, it's a fishery management strategy. And the agencies are very tuned to this. They've put a lot of resources into developing climate response strategies. However, keep in mind that those agencies, they're called management agencies, but really they're really pretty much constrained to measures that limit fishing effort or harvest levels. Their ability to actually manage resources don't really go too much beyond controlling how much fish are caught. Situation in the private sector is entirely different. Individuals, industry, and community, sorry, did I say next slide, are in a very different situation. These are three of the kind of standard approaches to fisheries adaptation. One is diversification. That means to diversify the resources that are fished or the products, increasing mobility in order to access resources over broader geographical areas. The second is to get higher value for what is caught, is produced through value-added processing, alternative markets, and so on. And much of this that's going on now has been going on for many years in Alaska. And the third is to mitigate risk, and there's lots of ways of doing that with insurance programs and financing plans and cooperatives and so on. And then outside of those three, the additional strategy, of course, is to diversify sources of income to reduce dependence on fisheries. So the result of all this, very briefly, this is a 25-page report, which I'm hoping you will have in your hands tomorrow. My colleague David Holan is going to try to make it in. He's bringing copies of the report in. If you have a chance to look at that, you'll see that the predictions that I'm making based on what I've been able to learn in this project are the following. One, change is definitely coming to the fisheries. There'll be profound change, but it will not be cataclysmic. The industry's not going to come screeching to a halt. Furthermore, those other non-abundance related factors will probably overshadow the changes that climate will have on the actual abundance of the resources. In other words, changes in markets and fish fishing technology and economics and so on. Those things have been going on all along. They continue, they have dramatic impacts and probably will overshadow the effects of climate. But there's no question that adaptation will be essential, and adaptation, to be effective, needs to be planned based on the latest and best information on science and technology and resource politics and so on. In other words, it requires an engaged industry and engaged community. So change brings problems, it also brings opportunities. Look for the report tomorrow. If you don't get it, can't find one, and you're interested, just contact me directly. It's up, it's being put up on the Marine Advisory bookstore, the Sea Grant bookstore, and you can download it, or I'd be glad to mail you one. So that's what I have. Thanks for your attention.